let me introduce Hamshya Rajkumar with the Glasgow Seed Library, so she can tell you a little more about herself and the Seed Library and how saving seeds relates to climate resilience. Take it away, Hamshya.
Hi everyone, my name's Hamshia and I am a seed librarian at the Glasgow Seed Library. And my focus is mainly on community, but I'm going to talk a little bit about why seeds are important and what they kind of mean for climate resilience, but also just for food. And there's quite a wee bit to cover. So I won't say anything anymore without the images. Otherwise, it'll just be a bit boring listening to my voice. So I'll share my screen and I'll put it in full screen mode. Can you see everything okay? Are we good? Yeah. Okay. So we'll start with a little image of tomato processing, which I'll go into a bit more later. So this will be like a very, very general introduction to the practice of seed saving or seed keeping, which is a very, very ancient practice, and it's why we have foods with us today. Oh, I'm going. Okay. So Cherokee Trail of Tears is a bean that I'm going to start with. I'm going to start with the story of a bean because I think this is a way to illustrate why we seed save. So Cherokee Trail of Tears is a French climbing bean that were deeply linked to the Cherokee people. But when they were pushed out of their land in the 1800s, they carried their beans with them. And unfortunately, as part of this forced march that they had to do, many, many people died. And it happened during the winter. And it was, yeah, the fact that this bean exists with us today is a true act of resilience for people to understand, to people to value why food sources like this are super, super important. If we look at Cherokee land was quite humid, subtropical, probably around about 21 to 35 degrees, not too far away from us. It's almost as similar as a climate that we can get. But because of seed libraries and seed networks today, there we do have seeds have actually been passed over to Britain. And we actually had a deposit in, I think 2 years ago now, from somebody who grew Cherokee Trail of Tears on the Isle of Arran on a farm that faces the sea. And he fed them seaweed, and there was like a really, really vigorous form of bean that grew. And this is one of the reasons why when we are looking at things to do with climate adaptation and people saving seeds, it's something that is happening on quite an international scale. And the act of sharing and really enables that. And especially when we're sharing across climates that are quite similar, it really gives that possibility for us to embrace new varieties. But also, this is a seed that has such a heavy story. And so seeds have always been moving, and people have been such a huge part of that. And hopefully that becomes a bit more clear later on. So, like, this is one of the reasons why we do need loads and loads and loads of varieties. It's because the more varieties we have, the more adapted they could be to our specific climate and our soils as well. So, for example, the figure that I'm showing you right now, it's American. Round about over a century ago, we would have had 544 varieties of cabbage. Now we're down to 28. We would have had 408 varieties of tomatoes. Now we're down to 79. You know, like if you think of the American continent, how vast the different climates are. We've got desert climates, a climate similar to us, so climates that are extremely cold. The more varieties you have that can do well in lots and lots of different climates, you've got more like solidified and more secure accesses to food, because we want to have lots of varieties that do really well in our climate and our soils. So the loss of varieties is a quite a scary thing, and seed saving allows for that. It enables us to carry those memories. So if you look at Scotland, for example, it's cold. is hardy, we've got low levels of light, our seasons are much shorter. So we want to have plants or vegetables that thrive in these environments, that are happy to be in lower levels of light. That can be quite what we love crops, especially that are early cropping. So they'll crop more early in the year and they'll maybe have time to ripen, or they'll just keep producing throughout the entire summer. And that's something that we also want to select for, which I'll go into a bit more detail about as well. In this part of Scotland, like Central Belt, it's also post-industrial. Our soils aren't the most nutritious, and that is another barrier that we have towards like food growing. And my former colleague used to do a lot of work around soils, which kind of overlaps with a lot of food growing projects as well. So what about Scottish? I'm putting Scottish in, inverted commas. When I mean Scottish, I mean Scottish in the way of like loving our climate and like really thriving in our climate. So this bean over here, I'm a wee bit dubious about this bean, but it's called King of the Early. It's a fantastic, well-producing bean that's again will crop quite earlier on in the year and keep producing. There's also the infamous musselburgh leek, who was bred by a head gardener called James Hardcastle in Musselburgh in the 1840s. And he would be importing leeks from France to Scotland. And he noticed he just weren't hardy enough. And we're like, okay, what am I going to do? He wanted to essentially stop importing. So he said, all right, okay, I've got a lot of land and a lot of head gardeners were attached to estates who had a lot of land, a lot of access to land, and maybe even walled gardens as well. So if I was James Hardcastle and I wanted to adapt this from France, I would be like, okay, I'm going to grow 100 musselburgh leek. Okay, most of them will die, but I'm going to save seeds from the ones that survive. You save those seeds and you do that again next year. And you keep doing that year after year after year until you've got a real healthy population of seeds or of vegetables that thrive in your weather. And as you can see with like musselburgh leek, it stands up in snow. Like it does really well in our kind of climate, which is a lot more colder from the parts of France that he imported from. So again, we are choosing seeds which is, from a climate not too dissimilar. It's not like they're from the tropics, for example. And we're finding ways to kind of edge its climate over or adapt it to us and our climate. But you're doing that through seed saving. You're seed saving from the plants that survive and hopefully taste well as well, because food is so important as well. And, market gardens were such an important trade in Musselburgh. So, trading and being able to produce something like a hardy Scottish leek is like quite a prize, and it's just a good bit of money, and it makes sense back in those days as well. There's an old Scottish variety of kale, which possibly dates back to the Viking times or earlier. There's a famous poem about it, which kind of hails how epic it is. When I've spoken to growers up in the north, they talk about how Shetland kale could stand in, what do you call it, like in the big storms that we've been having. So like kale and a lot of brassica plants in general are super hardy. They love Scotland. They do really well in our climate. To the fact that another grower was telling me that Scottish like brassica seeds were like super well coveted amongst growers because of their hardiness. There's an onion, for example, called Ailsa Craig onion. It was bred by a head gardener called David Murray in 1887. And this was in Culzean Castle that looked at Ailsa Craig, which was visible from the castle grounds. So that's why it's got its name, but it was bred here in Scotland. We also have this really cute little beetroot, which doesn't cut when you bleed. It's a carrot-shaped beetroot, and it was bred by the 19th century seed house called Dobbies & Co. in Edinburgh, which I don't know, might be the big Dobbies garden giant today. I don't know, maybe that's a conspiracy. But recently this has come back, this Dobbies purple, and I'll maybe speak about that a bit more later on. But again, this is like, when you're selecting, you can select from some interesting features that you might prize in your vegetables and make them really quite special. This is a really lovely story, and I haven't fixed my slide. I'm sorry, I forgot I'm using older slides. It's called the Gorta heart cabbage, and it's this epic, epic cabbage that apparently the seed originated in the Scottish borders. And I think the seed has fallen out of circulation in Scotland, but was found out it's been grown in the Sweeney family in Donegal for 4 generations. So that again is pretty brilliant that when people save seed and they pass it down their family, and that's when you start to see like heritage and heirloom seeds become really intrinsically linked by the fact that family and traditions, people keep growing and looking and stewarding this seed. So yeah, this is a pretty epic cabbage, as you can see. So I'm going to go very, very, very briefly. We can do like a whole couple of hours on this, the history of seed saving. I think it would even grate my brain. So I'm going to keep this nice and short and sweet. But just a very quick history of seed saving, particularly within the UK. And I've just used this painting here because I was looking into how I think plant geneticists or plant biologists were working with art historians to understand like what did our varieties used to look like, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. We don't know what they would look like. So what varieties have we lost? And like what varieties might have been coming in? And like it's quite mysterious and almost quite romantic, this part of seed saving world. So around about the 16th century, we were looking at growers. These are farmers, the smallholders. They all saved seed. It was a part of practice. For example, my family from Sri Lanka, my family were, my mum's side were rice paddy field farmers. I asked my mum, did we save seed? And she just looked at me and were like, obviously we saved seed. Like there was always rice grains like in the house that they lived in. So like saving seed it's so normal. You're not gonna, you don't have shops in the 16th century you can run down to and like buy seeds. You're saving seeds, you're sharing seeds. It's very much a part of practice. In the 17th and 18th century, in the UK, growers were still saving seeds. The first seeds catalogues were produced. And you start to see that very, very localized strains were being saved by local market gardeners. So the seed catalogs are very, very local. But the people who bought seeds were usually quite wealthy, right? Because seed saving skills are probably still quite prolific. In the Victorian era, we started to get towns and cities growing. It created a need for market gardens. And within these market gardens and within these areas, you get local seed houses that had to be established. And, people were still saving seeds, right? They were using their knowledge and their intuition. Maybe I shouldn't say little knowledge here. That isn't probably the right thing to say. So I should probably remove that. But say, for example, the seed house in Dundee was called Crowell's. In Edinburgh, it was Dobby's. I'm pretty sure in Perth, it was called the Scottish Seed House. In the early 1900s, we started to see a regulation of seed. Plant breeding became more scientific. We started to produce more varieties. And like mainly because of the war, seed production started to become more centralized in Essex. So you can start to see like people were starting to zone certain parts to allocate them to specific crops. This is to prevent cross-pollination. I'll go into that very briefly later on. But yeah, it had to be quite controlled. And also at this time, you had like, was it like Dig for Victory, and allotments started to come up, and people were growing and saving seeds because you kind of had to sustain your own food on your plate at home. Post-war, industrial agriculture, we started to get a commercial demand for perfect-looking vegetables with a long, long shelf life. We have something called F1 hybrids that I'll go into a bit more later on. Small local seed companies, they just could not compete and they just shut down. Then in the 60s and 70s, we started to get legislation, and the Plant and Variety Seed Act comes in. And then this brings in another element of control into how we can share seeds. So this is a seed industry structure today. It's a confusing mind map. So I'm just going to shade it over another color and show you what does this big, scary mind map mean. It means that 4 agrochemical companies control half of the global seed market, and they also control 3/4 of the global pesticides market. On top of that, I don't think I've got this slide next, but you have something to do with IP, like it becomes intellectual property. So for example, I think in America, they put a patent on the purple tomato. So if you are saving seeds from a purple tomato, it's not illegal for you to do so. So this is when seed saving becomes or this act of patenting is barbaric and it's horrific, and it stops us from being able to save seed, and we do need to therefore rely and buy seeds. And especially if we look into like ancient strains of seeds, seed saving has been happening for thousands of years. So for us to do that, and if you think, for example, go back to like the Cherokee Trail Tears, for example, like that is such a protected seed for those people to, for example, put a patent on a seed like that, or a quality of that would be really just a travesty. So what is open pollinated? And open pollinated in a way is like a non-genetically modified seed. This happens through natural pollination. When you save that seed, it should usually be true to that type. An F1 hybrid is a way of taking two perfect parent plants and you inbreed it for maybe like 7 generations roughly. And it then produces this perfect plant. And usually when you save that seed, it usually comes up quite scrambled and quite stressed, meaning that you need to go back to the shops and save it and buy it again and grow it out again. Usually, sometimes people quite like the chaos of an F1 hybrid, but you also don't know like what sort of genetics have been kind of been tampered with, I guess. So I'm just going to go into, I think, what am I going to go into? Yeah, we're going to go into some really ancient origins of some vegetables, just to kind of draw the kind of picture of how ancient seed saving is and how ancient some of our vegetables are. For example, a lot of these veg that we grow or we eat today, which are tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, beans, or squashes or curcubits, have all been brought over here due to the Spanish colonization of the Americas in the 1500s. The Inca, the Moqui, the Nazca people within the Andes Mountains were like absolutely like prolific like farmers and growers who developed like there's like thousands and thousands of varieties of potato that exist or did exist and thrive. So it is important to honor and recognize that as well. For example, if you look at what do you call it? Let me put my face like this. Yeah. So carrots are super ancient, like almost like 5,000 years ago. Carrots were first cultivated in the Iranian plateau. We would now call that place today, common day, a present day Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. And when people saved seeds, they saved for color and flavor. And when he starts to do this, when he starts to domesticate this wild carrot, so as you can see on the left, the wild carrot is a skinny wee root. And as we kept like finding ways to, I'm assuming, stress out the plant. This is when I become romantic. Like, what were people doing like 5,000 years ago? How were they stressing out plants? How were they getting plants to adapt and produce and become purple, to become orange, to become yellow? Is really, really quite cool. And obviously we were saving for flavor. And I'm pretty sure wild carrot is poisonous. So to move from something poisonous to something edible and nutritious and juicy is quite an epic feat of like human effort on a community level, I'm assuming as well. Just to show this is our wild carrot today. Our wild carrot is a plant that we'd see in like brownfield sites. And I was looking into quite a lot of our wild cultivars, and I'm like, are a lot of our wild cultivars plants that we'd call weeds, but are they just plants that are super adaptable? Like they're very, very resistant. And did our ancient ancestors look at these wild plants and be like, ooh, I see potential here to like adapt and work with you? Lettuce, for example, is believed to be cultivated as early as 4,500 BCE. And you can see some old images of lettuce, maybe like in hieroglyphics. And I think this is the same with lettuce as well. Lettuce is also supposed to be seen as be quite ancient. I also read somewhere that lettuce was seen to be an aphrodisiac as well. Sweet peas, we've got some archaeological evidence, a bit more sound than my Egyptian evidence, that they might have been domesticated from as early as 7,000 to 10,000 years ago in what we'd now call modern day Turkey and Jordan. We've also got, there's this little myth that I like to put out there. I actually removed this in my later presentations. Maybe it's a bit too mythic, but some people talk about that we used to grow muskmelons here in England. And I found someone talk about like, oh, this was like maybe grown as early as the 14th century, before glass houses and electric heating. We're like, whoa, this is amazing. What were people doing back then? But this is probably a bit too speculative. So I'll move on. Oh, not to this one. And okay, so if you want to become a seed keeper, if you want to start getting into seed saving, like what things do you need to start considering? What things do you need to start thinking about? You probably need to think about your population sizes. So you're not saving seeds from one plant. You're saving in a way that you're saving seeds from many, many plants. For example, there's this really, really cute micro dwarf tomato called Nina Neutron. Like, oh, I want to be a seed saver. I want to be a Nina Neutron's seed keeper. You're like, okay, you're not going to save seed from one Nina Neutron. You're going to save seeds from a minimum of 5 plants if you can. If you end up saving seeds from one plant and you want to share it to a seed library, you just tell us that, like, I've saved the seed from one plant only. We're like, all right, okay, we'll bulk it up with other seed. So we know when we're giving out that seed as a seed library back out again, we know there's a lot of health there. And when we're saving seeds from a good population size, we are preventing something called inbreeding depression. And it's just a lot more genetically healthy for us to save seeds from more than one plant. It's a common thing we see at the seed library that people deposit in seeds and they've just saved all their seeds from one plant. We're like, oh, or we don't know how many seeds, and it's quite important information for us, especially, and for any grower who wants to save seed. And yeah, like because it's such a cute wee tomato, like it's one of those plants you can grow in a wee sunny windowsill, maybe at home. So, for example, when you are starting to like save seeds, you really are in a way like sculpting your own variety. And as another grower was talking about, like, oh, or seed saver really, when you save seeds for the first time, you are becoming a plant breeder because any decision that you make might be different from the person next to you or your friend or anyone that you know. So as long as that plant is nice and healthy and it's pest free, you can select for whatever you want. For example, is it to do with taste? Is it to do with size? Is it with stripiness? Is it with smell? For example, this is a tomato called the Pink Tiger, and it's very stripy and maybe like, oh, I can't handle looking at stripes. So you're like, you know what? I'm going to save seeds from the ones that aren't stripy. And, over 10 years, you can breed that stripiness out. Or maybe you're really particular, like, I don't care about stripiness. Like, I want my tomatoes to hit the kind of the taste buds that hit me at the back of my mouth. So the great thing about tomatoes, what you might have seen on the first slide, is that you can chop your tomato, you can eat it, well, scoop out the seeds and you can eat it and you can see what that actually tastes like. And you can be very particular over what you save seed for. And so like seed saving could be like a joke at work, like, oh, it's like a curatorial practice, it's something that you can be quite playful with and have quite a lot of fun with. Okay, however, there's this big but, and this big but is the bumblebee but, and it's a but of pollination, which I'm gonna explain, but hopefully not be in a way that isn't so intimidating. And some of you will already know about being quite careful about maybe isolating some of your plants. Some plants will self-pollinate and some plants will cross-pollinate. We have this kind of spectrum of what we'd call inbreeders, which are plants that self-pollinate, and plants that are outbreeders that like to cross-pollinate. For example, we would call corn promiscuous because corn just loves wind pollinating just out there with 100 other corn. Like it really needs that genetic variety. If you want to get into seed saving, like, oh my God, this is intimidating, I don't want to think about pollination, just forget about all those plants that I've just mentioned. And you can just start with the plants that are super easy to seed save from, which are actually that and French beans that you can, yeah, and you don't need to worry about, and you can really, really start that journey. Like, what does it look like to plant a seed? Watch the plant's entire journey and then save that seed afterwards. And it's such an interesting thing to do. For example, with lettuce, you'll never let that plant go to seed. And maybe later on I might be able, if I've got time, I can show you an image of like when lettuce bolts, it becomes this tall and huge plant, and you get to see its flower, and then you get to harvest its seed again. So seed saving is really been with a plant throughout its entire cycle, which is an incredible thing to sometimes witness in certain plant types. So yeah, if you want to start experimenting with seed saving, just start with the easy ones. I just want to talk about embracing the bumblebee buzz, or embracing the randomization of pollination and the opportunities it could give. And there's a really interesting bean, a broad bean called the Black Isle broad bean. And it's got a lovely little story. So, for example, one day they found this flower going quite black, and they realized that this broad bean crossed with a flower called the Whitcomb manita, and which is quite fascinating. And by doing so, they started to realize, oh, my flowers are turning quite black. And they ended up, working with this, and this became the glorious Black Isle broadbean. So this is a chance cross-pollination. They didn't realize this would happen, but sometimes great, interesting chances can happen. You're like, oh, okay, I've got a lovely new variety that could possibly even be more resilient to my climate and my local soils as well. So this is where you can really play with cross-pollination and take it even a step further. And there's a type of growing called landrace gardening or diverse populations, where you purposely grow different varieties of a plant and you purposely allow them to cross-pollinate. For example, I'm just going to use okra because it's just something I'm obsessed with. Like maybe you take a white okra, a long green okra variety, or like a pink okra, which is maybe one called pink Okinawa in Japan. Maybe you take something called Clemson spineless, which I think is American. Maybe you take the white velvet, which might come from Chile in South America, or something like that. You take all these different varieties of the same veg and you purposely allow them to cross and you just see what happens. Then you save seed from whatever you want. Maybe it's to do with the taste. Okra is pretty sticky and gooey. Maybe you care about gooiness and that's what you seed save for. Maybe again, you're like, oh, I want color. I want girth. I need this kind of fattiness when I cook it. This is when you can really be quite playful because you're almost playing with this big palette of lots of different plants. But at the same time, again, if you go back to the story of something like Cherokee Trail of Tears and you bring in that plant and you allow it to cross-pollinate, what happens? You lose that story. Is that dishonoring other people? There are people who don't like landrace growing because you lose story and you lose the heritage and you lose people. Like, for example, if you go back to the Sweeney family in Donegal, who really stewarded Got Hot Cabbage for many generations. And I wish I showed this slide, but I didn't. But brassicas can really easily cross with each other. So they really made that effort to isolate and maintain and look after that variety. So there's different types of seed saving, different ways of growing. You can be super, I'm going to look after a heritage variety. I'm going to keep that line the way it is. Obviously, it will change, I believe, because climate is always changing. So the plant will probably subtly adapt in ways that you might not be that obvious. Or you can play with diverse populations or like landrace growing, where you maybe create these new cultures and play with lots and lots of different seeds and allow them to cross and be very, very playful. It appeals to different types of people who have different types of values. So there's something that I think for everybody when it comes for seed saving. So if you want to go into landrace growing, it opens up a whole spectrum. You can really start playing with lots and lots of different varieties, and you can just not care at all. So yeah, so it's not really up to you if you want to play with diverse populations. It can be quite fun. The only thing with carrots that I've got in here is that it could cross with a wild carrot. So you bring in wild genetics again, which some people are like, oh, that's dangerous. And some people are like, oh, so it's this is where my knowledge stops a little bit because I don't really know exactly what feels safe. And, you might have to start surveying the area around you and know what distances are. So sometimes there will be a bit of worries here and there. Okay, where is the Glasgow Seed Library? So we've currently moved as of last week. One of our collections will now be in the Mitchell Library. And our main collection is also still in the CCA as well. I think I'm going to try and move past this a little just so I can just show you what a cabinet. So basically, a cabinet is a cabinet. This is the Glasgow Seed Library. And when you open it, it's there in its full glory of basically seeds and in jars and boxes for you to put your donations in. We do ask things like questions which we've changed for us to understand like the information that I've just kind of spoken to you about is like these are things that we actually do want to know. Um, a lot of our seeds that we do bring in are, do I have it open? Oh yeah. So sorry, under this is our logbook, and we ask people usually just to fill in their details, name of their name, their postcode, and the seeds that they're borrowing or the seeds that they're returning, or both. We don't charge a membership fee. We're funded also by the UK SPF fund actually, and so yeah, seeds. We operate on the principle that seeds should be for free. All seed libraries globally across the world should offer their seats for free. Maybe there could be like a small admin charge, like a membership fee for a whole year. But other than that, by essence, seats should be for free like they used to be back in the day, before the ripe old age of capitalism. And we also only stock organic, open pollinated seeds. Again, we don't stock anything that's genetically modified or seeds that are not going to be true to type, because that's, again, another principle we all have. Usually, as I mentioned, oh, I didn't mention this before, but we actually grow our seeds at Lamb Hill Stables. So it is they're properly like Glaswegian seeds that grow up in the north of Glasgow. And so we try to steward crops which might be a bit more difficult to look after. And we then put that into the seed library. Our seed library collection is also made from community deposits. We love a bounty. We love it when people come in and they deposit seeds to us. It makes us really, really, really happy. Makes us feel like we're doing our job and things are going in the right direction. But we also do buy in seeds as well. We buy in seeds from places like Seeds of Scotland. Seeds of Scotland is the only seed house in Scotland. It opened up a couple of years ago, kind of northish of the Black Isle. We also have Real Seeds down in Wales. Again, Wales has quite a similar climate to us, so we quite like to get our seeds from Real Seeds. There's also other seed houses like Tamar Organics, Vital Seeds, and Tomato Revolution. But yeah, this is like some old events that we have on, but just to show that this is some of our details. If you want to email me, by the way, you're really, really welcome to email me. And these are some of our little socials that you can come up and have a look. I don't have anything else to say for this bit. I can talk a little bit about seed processing if you'd like to, but I can also take questions right now and I can stop. So it's really up to you guys what you'd like.
Any questions, anybody? I believe there's a little function you can raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, or thoughts about where would you like to hear more about seed processing? Yes, I believe Kenny is just saying he's getting Grangemouth coming on to the seed library. I hope you mean on Saturday, Kenny. Yeah.
I'll just unmute. No, I'm collecting it on Friday for
Okay,
Saturday.
brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know, when I seen the form, that was really quite cool. I was like thinking, okay, so from the library side of things, I did wonder, how does that work? You know, if you take a seed, put it in the ground and grow it into a plant, you're not going to be able to take it back to the library. But now I get it. Now I get it. So maybe we should get some forms from the library for Saturday. Do you have a copy of these forms that you can send us?
Is it the deposit forms that you...
Yeah.
Yeah, this is deposit forms that we use, but I'm really happy to share it. I think this is information they would probably like as well. So I don't know how Falkirk, Grangemouth Library work, but I'm assuming they probably would like a wee bit of info.
I think it's interesting the connection between all the seed libraries, because I'm most familiar with the seed library in my area, which is G63, so north of Glasgow and Stirlingshire. And we have boxes, so we don't have like a big cabinet that people can go to. They're like plastic boxes with little drawers, and they're put in all the libraries in the area. And people do take, I know sometimes they're F1 in there, and it's just marked on the envelope what they are. And then you just kind of keep track of taking them. Really, I don't, certain times a year, then there's events about collecting them, I think.
Yeah.
So I think all the libraries probably operate differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I think maybe we could be a bit more stricter. I think we've even spoken about maybe some people just want seeds for the sake of it. So, or maybe like for like an art project or something. So we might give them any of like the F1 hybrids that people have given us during seed swaps.
I'm just going to jump in and say I'm going to stop recording so we can continue the
Or
conversation. Absolutely.
Or I can even quickly go into a bit about seed processing if you'd like to.
Oh, that would be
It's
fab.
up to
Yeah,
you.
go for it. Yeah.
Because I've just split up my slides a little bit, so I'll go into my other desktop and share my screen with this one. And where do you go? Enter full screen. Okay, so we've been pretty food heavy with the way that I've been speaking earlier on. You can save seed from flower cultivars as well, and a lot of people are not interested again in like food, so they might be interested in dye seeds, for example. And I just picked up loads and loads of woad seeds from a community garden last weekend. So it's just to mention that seed library collections, they're not that fixed, they're always in flux. So it really depends on what people in your local area are growing, what they love to do. Is it to eat? Is it to dye? Is it just for beautiful flowers in your garden? And what they want to save seed from, what they want to share. So a seed library in your local area will be very reflective of people and what they love to grow and what does well in your climate specifically. So it's very climate specific, but also very community specific in that way as well. So for example, these are really easy, usually really easy seeds for you to kind of save seeds from are these flowers, which can also act as food as well. There's different ways for us to kind of understand, okay, when something is like ready for like a seed harvest. You know, for example, if you look at lettuce here on our left, you can see the lighter green leaves. And as it bolts, it produces these more darker leaves until it actually produces flowers that are quite similar to a dandelion. They produce a flower and then the flower head will kind of turn like a dandelion seed head, and they like to be wind pollinated, or they like to be thrown away in the wind or blown away in the wind, I guess. So this is when we won't really, you won't see this part of your crop because usually you're quite interested in eating. So you would never allow your plant to bolt, but allowing your plant to bolt is the only way we get seed, and that's how you can give it back. For example, if you allow, maybe you want to grow like maybe a patch of maybe like 15 lettuces, maybe 10 lettuces. Maybe you'll keep, and you can maybe do cut and come again. You can cut quite a lot of it down and still eat it. But maybe you'd let maybe 5 or maybe 6 or more to allow them to go to seed. And you can collect that seed and you can use it again the next year, or you can share it with your seed library, or you can do both. I think for us as a seed library, it's most important that people have seed saving skills, because if the skills and the culture is there, it doesn't really, we don't really need to, and as long as people are sharing seeds, you don't really need seed libraries to that extent. When you look at peas and beans, you're going to wait for something to fully dry on the plant so it produces a pod, and it kind of begins to kind of crack open, or it wants to be pulled out. So that's something I think is very, very clear and quite intuitive. For example, tomatoes are fun because you can do tasting and seed saving at the same time. So it's a culinary experience as well, which could be quite, my colleague, I think a couple of weeks ago, did like a big tomato tasting event where people brought different tomatoes that they've been growing and they tasted them. And it was great because people were able to determine, oh, I love that tomato and I'll definitely grow that again next year. And it was great for people in the local area to show what tomatoes have been doing really well in their local area. So like seed saving like this is, yeah, throwing like kind of taste events like this is great because you don't need to waste 6 years or something like that, maybe growing different types of tomatoes if your space, if you don't have a lot of space, for example. And maybe there's certain types of veg, like for example, peppers, you want the fruit to start to wrinkle, and that's when the seeds are ready for them to be ripened. I need to show you, hopefully, our seed packet at one point, but our seed packets have all this information on them. So you know exactly when and how to save seed, which is really, really helpful for you guys. There's different types of seed processing. We'll do things like wet processing, and we do quite a lot of dry processing. And we normally run lots of different events that get people hands-on to do it. And people love it because you can just get real stuck in, and it's quite meditative. Or it can be quite violent, you know, do stuff like thrashing, just hitting bags around, and it's really quite fun. This is just to show that we use quite a lot of sieves. It's quite a key part of seed saving equipment, just for us to kind of break open across chaff, which is like our seed head or the seed containers almost in a way, to the seed itself. We do things like wind winnowing. For example, seeds are the most heaviest part of a plant. So maybe you've been breaking into a bowl, like the seeds itself and the crushed parts of the chaff, and maybe they're quite difficult to discern. So if you just blow into it, the seeds should normally stay, but because they're the most heaviest part of that plant, and the chaff should fly away. I think we should have, yeah, you can also do like really simple like wind winnowing on a nice bright sunny day where it's a bit windy. This is us actually in both occasions. I'm pretty sure we were processing flax, a flax specifically for fiber, and we've lost a lot of I think we've lost Scottish flax varieties, which was sad. So we ended up trying to find like some Belgian and Dutch varieties. And again, we grew this as a diverse population, or like a modern day landrace, to let them cross and adapt to Scotland again. And yeah, it's just a fun way for people to start processing seeds. For us at the back, we get a lot of seeds sometimes, so we don't maybe do the fun stuff that we'd maybe do with the community as much. We do quite a lot of mass seed cleaning and seed processing. This is my former colleague, Louise, who would just get right stuck in. And there's this, and we use a design called the seed cleaner design, I guess, and it's an open source design. You'll find it on the Real Seeds website, I'm sure. And it's very simple. You get Henry the Hoover as your ally, get him plugged in. It creates again this kind of suction process. The light elements will drop, and the light elements will fly, and the heavier elements of the seed will drop. And you can see just on our right, you know, we do bring this out to community events, and this is when we can take a break because Louise is now having her lunch, and we get members of the community to help us. So it is really important for us to do this kind of mass cleaning and processing at a community scale if we can, or we end up working quite fast and we'll do it kind of behind our closed doors. And yeah, I think that's it when it comes to just showing a bit of what seed processing looks like, or what the seed kind of behind the seeds look like. Yeah, so I think I just seen a bit of a question about proper seed collection timing, when to pick, how to package seeds, and in what container. Like when we package seeds, we want to make sure they're fully dry. So like in an ideal world, we might have things like a dehumidifier, and to kind of mitigate that, we do put our seeds when they're fully dry in glass jars. We put a bit of a silica packet in there. We want to be quite careful because we don't want to dry them out too much. And that's how we store them in a cupboard that is as temperature controlled as it can be. Like we're not like Svalbard, and we're not a seed bank that we're specifically preserving. Ideally, we want seeds to get out, be saved again, and it keeps coming in and out, or it keeps getting shared, right? Because we don't want to host our seeds for too long. So that's our kind of way of temporarily storing seeds, is usually in glass jars, and we put them in brown envelopes, and all the information is usually written on the brown envelope. And I can maybe rummage through my bag and I should be able to find what a seed envelope looks like if you'd like, or I can email that out later on. Some seeds might need cold stratification, which is like when you need them to be frozen. That's mainly for like wild seeds and, for example, maybe certain types of tree seeds, for example, and you do mimic that. And like, for example, like hawthorn needs to mimic the being digested through a bird. Like our cultivated seeds, as you've seen, like they're super ancient and they're dependent on us. So a lot of our veg cultivars have kind of they don't really need cold storage or anything like that. Not like frozen storage. I think you'd maybe freeze it if you wanted to freeze it. I think the Heritage Seed Library, they might freeze it for like maybe 10 years or something for them to then grow it out again. We're not freezing. We don't need to freeze because we want the seeds to be back out and you know and always be in that state of flux, if that makes sense.
So at your site that you have in Lambs Hill, do you have, are you growing to grow to seed every year?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow, it must look so cool. Do you have any pictures of that site?
I do. I have got some pictures I can maybe rummage through and have a look, but we definitely have some like we've got raised beds so that we don't really grow in like a huge site. We grow in maybe 6 kind of long raised beds, and we try to be as spatially efficient as we can. So it's not in an ideal world, it'd be awesome if you had like quite a big site and we've got like a seed farm and we can be very experimental maybe. That would be a really fun project or a dream, but we try and we work on beds. So the way that we grow should be fairly accessible to like maybe allotmenteers, if that makes sense in terms of scale. I was just saying earlier on that we were growing courgettes and we let our courgettes become marrows and really big so we can collect the seed. And our marrows got stolen last week. So we maybe only collected 5, but we could have got 10. That would have been quite a nice, good, healthy size. And it is really heartbreaking because we look after that seed, you know, all the way, and we make sure it gets, you know, we give it the proper care as much as we can. And, you know, it's pretty heartbreaking. So that's the other problem that we have. Our site isn't locked, so it's prone to vandalism. Last year, we had our beds burned. We lost quite a bit of kale plants. Brassicas really need quite a lot of, again, like a really strong population size. So that was also quite disappointing for us as well. So yeah, we're not as foolproof and as perfect as we can be. So we've been discussing a lot as a seed library. It's like, oh, do we really need a seed farm? Do we want to create something like a seed circle where lots of different community growers and community gardens and allotmenteers, do they just maybe grow one crop for seed saving only? But each garden grows different types of crops and they grow that out to bulk, and then we share that. And I think that creates a lot more diversity and a lot more resilience, right? When you've got people, and then maybe the seeds get moved around, and that could work quite nice, and it puts less pressure on us to bulk out seed, for example, because we can't be the only people who are doing that.
Does anyone else have any?
Sorry, I was desperately trying to get myself off mute. And we do have a question from Kenny. Does some seeds not need a freeze? Do you mean kind of overwinter in the ground and the ambient temperatures dropping right down? Is that a thing?
I think Hamshya already addressed that.
Cool.
I think she answered that question.
Okay.
She picked up on it in the chat herself. Let's do it.
So it wasn't a freezer necessarily. It was just literally the temperature outside.
I mean, some plants would. It's mainly wild plants that need something called cold stratification, that's staying cold in the ground and go through that overwintering phase. If you wanted to store your seeds long term, you can pop them in a freezer and then use them 10 years later. So that's when you'd use a freezer, but they don't. Our cultivated plants, they don't necessarily need a freeze. That makes sense.
And that makes sense. That's perfect. We've got about 5, 6 minutes left if anybody else has any questions. I think from oh, sorry, we've got so Kenny, do you want to kind of talk this through?
Yeah, that's why I was asking about the freeze. I really wanted to grow turnips here for a large turnip carving competition, and the, the seeds that I got, the Swede seeds that I got, failed. I put them in the ground. It was a really hot spring, and I think I put them in too early, and they never got a coldness when I planted them. And then I wondered if maybe perhaps the seeds themselves needed a freeze. So that was
Yeah,
why the question was there.
I think Swedes really like cold. Like they really do like being in the cold. So certain seeds need like not like maybe like a freeze, but they need cold temperatures to germinate. So I think definitely with Swedes, yeah, they probably needed to go in at a time where it's a bit more colder than it is a hot spring. I don't think they would germinate well or thrive well in a hot spring.
That brings up a question for me in relation to adaptation to climate change. And I'm wondering if you have experienced any kind of feedback from communities about seeds and changing conditions in relation to our climate so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's if we seed save quite consistently year after year, we will be adapting, to our climate. And I've heard from like different people like, oh, this has been a bad year for beans, or it's been a good year for tomatoes, or something like that. Depending on when they've got a warmer summer or like a colder summer, certain crops thrive better than others. And I think this is why seed saving is important, because it can, if you think of, say, that carrot that's 5,000 years old, it's got a genetic memory of being that ancient. And I think we need to make sure that if we keep saving seeds and looking after them, we can continue that thread, that big line, because they become more and more adapted, and they will carry those memories of the fluctuating weathers that I think we need to keep an eye on. Also, like, there's one thing that I've been noticing, and I don't know if this is even to do with like uh pollination and whether that's a human problem or not, but people have been talking about how when they've been saving tomatoes, they don't have loads of seeds inside their tomatoes when they're saving them. And we don't know if it's because we allow the plant is a self-pollinator. Do we need to, is the wind enough? Do you have to actually try and mimic the vibration of a bee more? I remember going down to the Heritage Seed Library and seeing one of the gardeners there use a tuning fork to like encourage pollination, to encourage the vibration of like pollination as well. So I think alongside with climate change, we need to think about how it affects our pollinators. Like I heard a really lovely story about in California, there's a bee that's been in decline, but when they started growing out okra, there's this bee that started to what do you call it, jump in its population again, because it that okra flower, I think, replaced the flower it used to pollinate. So things like that, it's not just maybe to do with climate specific itself, it's wider in terms of like our pollinators, and also like making sure that we've got healthy microbes in the soil as well. So it's I think we need to think about it in a much wider picture.
Yeah, spring comes something stupid like 28 days earlier now than what it did in the 80s. And so sometimes the pollinators aren't awake yet because they're still seasonal, but the plants come out because the ground's warm.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened to my Swedes. It was super hot this spring.
Yeah. Maybe you can chance, if you've got some seeds, maybe you can chance growing them a bit more earlier.
Yeah, that's why I was asking. I'm going to have to. I was gutted.
Maybe grow some seeds a wee bit more earlier and maybe keep some seeds aside. I mean, you can try and patch it. Then you can try and see, okay, which ones do well. And that's really good data, actually, to like understand how plants could be adapting to certain weather conditions. We love people who do stuff like that. And like, oh, that's good information. And you're like, then you've got those seeds have different memories, which is cool.
Do we have any other questions on the chat, Stuart?
No, that's everything. We've covered everything.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, I think we're at our time. So I would just like to thank everyone for joining us.
Oh, I was gonna quickly show a little seed packet. I'll just
Okay.
quickly show a seed packet looks like. You can see here, this is what our seed packets look like. And at the bottom, hopefully it's not too reflected, you can see we put all the information of what you need for seed saving. And usually we put the right number of seeds that will be used for seed saving as well. So yeah, these are, if you come to Glasgow Seed Library, you're very welcome to have a look. And if you're around, just let us know. You're always welcome to get in contact with.
That looks great. Thank you so much. That was so interesting. Really enjoyed that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, Hamshya. It's fantastic. Bye for now.